Hey, my name's Matt, welcome to Bask in the Story, and today we're talking non-fiction because we're getting very close to the end of October, which means Nonfiction November is just around the corner. This will be my first year doing Nonfiction November and my first year as a booktuber doing Nonfiction November, so I'm quite excited. I do enjoy reading non-fiction anyway, and I don't generally try and pick up a book, have a book on the go of non-fiction, but Nonfiction November is a dedicated month to reading non-fiction. It's arranged by Olive from a book Olive, and she's been running it for quite a few years now, and it's just a superb opportunity to read more non-fiction. So if you don't read any non-fiction, I encourage you to pick up at least one non-fiction book on any topic you like. It doesn't matter. Read a non-fiction book. You'll find that they can be incredibly engaging. They're not got, especially more the modern ones, are not stodgy, old, just information heavy, but they can be absolutely fascinating. And there's such a wide range of books now, such a wide range of topics to cover. So you will find something that appeals to you, I am sure. But for this video, I'm going to do 12. I've got 12. So Olive gives 4 prompts, challenges, 4 one-word starting points if you wish to take part in this. But by all means, read anything you want. It doesn't matter. You don't have to follow these prompts. But I'm going to give you 3 books for all 4 prompts, which is 12 books in total. I'm not going to read 12 books in November. I don't think I've ever read 12 books in a month. But I'm going to pick and choose. There's some I just recommend that I've read previously that I would recommend you picking up if you want to hit the prompts, and some that and the others I'm very interested in reading for the first time. So the 4 prompts are fraud, web, capital, and display. And you can do what you like with them. You can make a book just fit as best you can into one of those. You can cram it in however you like. They're just starting points to get the ideas flowing, get the juices flowing. So I'm going to take each one in turn. What I'll do is I'll timestamp each of the 4 prompts down below. So if there's a specific prompt that you want to cover off that you haven't got any ideas for, by all means check out the timestamps, but we'll run through them in that order that Olive announced them. I'll also link down below. There's been a couple of videos of TBRs that people have announced. So I know obviously a book Olive has put her TBR and her suggestions out, and Melinda from Web of Stories has also done hers. So I'll link them both down below. So go check them out. And I think there's only one book on my list that matches any of theirs. So that'll give you a big range of book possibilities for you to go and explore. So we'll start off with fraud. And fraud immediately led me to 2 books that I've previously read, which I've got copies of when I think about fraud. And the first one is James Randi, The Faith Healers. So this is his investigation, debunking of the faith healing industry and various other frauds, for a better word. The fraudulent activities that take people in and in most cases are money-making schemes of one sort or another, and actually using experiments to test whether what they claim is actually true or not, rather than just taking it on faith. So it is a fascinating read. It's really, really interesting. There's a huge number of short chapters in here which cover off different bits. So it could be faith healing, it could be parts of the church, it could be, what's we got here? We've got evangelical preachers, and debunking some of the claims they make. There's a huge amount in here, and if you're interested in finding out more about sort of debunking of this area and the fraud activity and how it's done, and how he used experiments and science and testing hypothesis to prove that they couldn't do what they claimed they could do, it's brilliant. It's a very easy read, and James Randi being a former magician, he talks about magicians and frauds as well, and how like magicians are, you're buying into that they are going to deceive you. So there's sort of a kind of morality to that actually you accept that they're going to deceive you. And part of the fun is, well, how on earth did they do that? As he's talking about faith healers who claim to be genuine, who aren't. Anyway, excellent book. Well worth your time if you want to read about frauds. The other one that always springs to mind when I hear fraud is Lance Armstrong. Probably the one of the greatest cheats in sporting history. And this is the program 7 Deadly Sins by David Walsh, who was a journalist who was pretty sure that Lance Armstrong had been cheating and spent many years trying to discover what was happening and how it was happening and why it was happening. And eventually, Lance Armstrong admitted to it, but that was after many, many years, and the 7 deadly sins obviously reflects the 7 Tour de France championships that he won in the time that he was cheating. And it's also about how the organisations, Lance Armstrong himself, but the organisations that supported him enabled that. And that's what's really fascinating about this book, is how the deception was enabled and this activity was enabled by other partners. It obviously wasn't just a one-man show. It's a team. It's how governing bodies are implicated or potentially implicated in it as well. Fabulous story, well told, and it will engage you. And if you do enjoy sport, and cycling is not a sport I particularly enjoy. I don't watch Tour de France and stuff, but I do enjoy sport, and seeing how such a level of cheating is enabled within a sporting arena is shocking, but very, very fascinating. So there's 2 books I have read for Ford. One that I want to pick up this November is actually it's called Cultish, and it's about, I'll put a picture up here, it's about the language of cults and how cults developed and how they, I suppose, manipulate people, us, into believing what they're selling, even if it's fraud. I think it covers off things like Jamestown, but also things like multi-level marketing and various other cultish groups and scenarios, and hopefully how they use language, because language is always interesting as a reader. Language always engages and motivates to understand how people use it, how writers use it, and in this case, how cults use it to bring along their followers to believe what they need to believe for that cult to prosper. So that sounds really fascinating. So they're the 3 books for the fraud prompt. As I say, 2 I've read, 1 I want to read, and that's probably one of the ones that I will pick up in November if I get the chance. So the next prompt is web. And my immediate thought on web was, and this may show my age, the internet used to be called the World Wide Web. And that led me to a book that I've wanted to read for a while, which is Hello World, Being Human in the Age of Algorithms by Hannah Fry. Now this is a book about algorithms and how algorithms work and how that impacts us as a society and as people, and I find that fascinating. And I suppose being on YouTube, the algorithm of that has probably, for many of you, led you to seeing this video, or maybe even clicking on this video, but certainly having this video in your feed was produced by some form of algorithm. But it's also how many algorithms there are now within our lives that we don't necessarily recognise, that are always are pervading our existence without us consciously being aware of it. And that's what I've been finding fascinating, because computer science is not something I know a great deal about. It's not an area I'm well versed in. I think this is a good introductory text into that field, and should be, knowing Hannah Fry from some of her BBC series, she has a easy manner which enables one to get engaged in subjects which may be much more complex, but simplifies them for a more general audience. So I'm quite looking forward to reading that, and and I have done for a while. I think in 2018 it won the Baillie Gifford Award, if I remember rightly, or certainly was nominated if it didn't win, and it's therefore been on my list for quite a while. So I think if you know computer science and you know how computer science works, I don't think this will be the book for you, because I think it'll be too simple. But for me, who doesn't, I think this is a very good introduction to that topic. So that is one I will probably prioritise to pick up as well. My next book for web is looking more at nature, and obviously you think spider web, and then I thought, well, you could do arachnids and look at that, but then I thought, well, actually, what gets stuck in spiders' webs? Flying things. And there's a book that's recently got some high praise called, let me get the title right, Taking Flight, The Evolutionary Story of Life on the Wing by Lev Parikian. I may have got that pronunciation wrong. So this is about the evolution of flight in the natural world. And, you know, there are so many flying animals, insects that live around us. You've got birds, you've got numerous insects, but many of them have different ways of flying. They've evolved differently to fly. And I think this is an exploration of that evolutionary process and all the different types of flying, and to some extent the miracle of flying and flight, and how animals fly. And being a land-based creature myself, obviously, you know, it is quite miraculous seeing animals fly and just imagining being able to fly. And I think that's quite a common occurrence. And I remember as a kid, my dad had a book of Great British Birds, it may have been, but the front of it had this amazing section of birds and flight and on their bone structure and how it's like a honeycomb structure to keep them really light but the bones strong. Anyway, fascinating. It's a fascinating topic. I've always been fascinated by biology, so I think this one for Webb works well. So that is Taking Flight by Lev Parikian. I'm going to say Parikian. Sounds right to me. So the third book for the Webb prompt is going to be Entangled Life. Let me go home. Entangled Life, How Fungi Make Our Worlds, Change Our Minds and Shape Our Futures by Merlin, Sheldrake. It's another one that I know has been praised recently. I believe is on one of the prize lists. Can't remember which. But why is it Web? Well, I talked about the World Wide Web to start with, but this is the Wood Wide Web as it's been coined. And fungi, how they interact with everything in the world. And fungi are a fascinating thing. They're not a plant, they're not an animal, they're something unique, so individual. They can be microscopic, they're also the biggest organism in the world. Just fascinating. They can digest plastic, they don't have brains yet they can kind of have some level of intelligence and solve problems. They link up trees, and this is where the web comes in. They link up trees so they can enable communication between plants underground. Just an absolutely fascinating, I guess it's not an animal plant. Fungi are absolutely fascinating. I don't know enough about them. It's something I want to learn more about. There's so many different types and variations and impacts on life in general. I think this will be an absolutely engrossing read. So that is one. Again, it's a relatively high priority. Whether I'll get to it in November as well, I don't know. But Entangled Life sounds fascinating and it fits with the web absolutely perfectly, in my opinion. So there's the three for web. So we've done Fraud, we've done web. Next will be Capital. So for Capital, the first book I want to recommend is pretty on the nose, I suppose. And it is called Capital in the 21st Century by Thomas Piketty. So, I mean, you don't get much more on the nose than that. Keyword capital, first word in the title, capital. Anyway, so this is a book about the evolution of how capital is spread amongst society. So why do we end up with inequality? Why is there a concentration of wealth? And what it delves into is, I think it looks at 20 different countries worth of data. I think it stretches back a couple hundred years to 1800s till now and looks at that data and tries to analyse the data to understand how capital works in the 21st century and why it works the way it does and why wealth and capital is spread as it is spread throughout society, why we get the inequality, why we get that concentration of wealth in a few incredibly obscenely wealthy individuals, and yet there is huge poverty elsewhere as well. So I think that obviously bang on the nose for the prompt, but a fascinating read. Whether I'll get to it in November, I don't know, but it's certainly one on my list. It's been on my list for a little while, so I'd like to get to it. So the next book I want to recommend, and probably the one I will read for this prompt, is staying with the capital as wealth and money theme, is The Ascent of Money by Neil Ferguson, I think. And this is about the history of money and what is money. And I suppose what sparked my interest in this is, you know, the question of what really is money and why do we give value to the pieces of, I'd say paper, but it's not actually paper, but you know what I mean, the notes we have and the coins that we have. Why do we give them value and why does society value them, and what impact does money have on society, and how it seems so interlinked with everything we do. You look at any sort of politics, policy decisions, money is at the heart of it. You know, you look at businesses, obviously money is the critical element of that. You look at life and living and, you know, the cost of living crisis that many of us are going through at the moment, and, you know, it comes down to money and wealth. So understanding the history of it, where it comes from, why it is how it is, and the benefits and hopefully the cons of it, and that history sounds quite fascinating to me. And that's the Ascent of Money by Neil Ferguson. So that is probably one I will read in November. I think for this prompt, it's probably the one I will get to, but we shall see. So for the third one, I've gone a slightly different route. So I've taken capital as in capital city. So I wanted something about capital city, and I live in London, so it's obviously something about London. I thought you could do history of London or anything like that. But there's a book that sprung to mind, which I have previously read. There's also an excellent podcast done by the author on this book. And that is The Five by Hallie Rubenhold. So it's around the victims of Jack the Ripper. And so it doesn't really concentrate on Jack the Ripper, it concentrates on the 5 women he killed, who, if you read the popular accounts of these murders, you just get the detail of, it sort of denigrates them as just being prostitutes or women of the night, and doesn't really give you any detail about the people they actually were and their lives and their history. And Hallie Rubenhold does a great job of looking into these 5 women and trying to understand what their lives were and how it led them to the night that they crossed paths with Jack the Ripper. And you get some really interesting stories within that, and you get more rounded picture of who these women actually were, rather than just the stereotypes that we generally hear. And it's really well done. It's a fascinating read. She's obviously studied it hugely. I would also, if you enjoy the book, or if you don't want to read the book and you want to listen to the podcast, it's called Bad Women by Hallie Rubenhold, and she's done another series later on, but the original series is on these 5 women, and it's brilliant. It's quite an immersive podcast, so worth listening to. So if you don't want to read the book, I would recommend the podcast as well, but it is really good and informative to hear the stories of the victims rather than the glorying of a murderer. It's much more interesting hearing the lives of the women and why they ended up where they were. Just brilliant, well worth reading. So that's my third book for the capital prompt. So the fourth prompt is display, and my immediate thoughts on display was art. And then that led me to the thought of, well, who's a famous artist that I want to learn more about? And Leonardo da Vinci jumped to my mind. And there's plenty of fabulous books on Leonardo da Vinci, but one that is a bit different, takes to the side a little bit, and also makes it possibly fit in the fraud as well. But it's called The Last Leonardo by Ben Lewis. And this book is about Salvator Mundi, the painting of Christ that was found, I think it was sort of rediscovered in 2005 and then sold for $400 and something million, most expensive painting ever sold at auction. But what Ben Lewis does in this book, in my understanding, is he looks at, is that really the genuine article? Is that really the painting by Leonardo da Vinci? And hence the fraud element. Or is there another one? And, you know, where has it been for the hundreds of years it was missing? And he sort of does some investigations into it and tries to understand. And the art world itself is quite shadowy, shall I say. There's a lot of things that aren't very transparent, and we don't really understand, or I don't understand, how things are done, and, like, you know, how do they identify what is genuine and what is not? And it seems to be just people's opinion or experts' opinions, and how much value should we put into that? And you know, so this leads me to, it should be hopefully a very interesting book about the art industry, the painting industry specifically, and also sort of the history of that painting. And, you know, is there a forgery? Is there deception? Is there more than one? Did Leonardo ever actually paint Salvator Mundi or not? It sounds fascinating. So that was the first one for display that I picked up, that I will hope to get to for that topic. The next two are quite different. So for display, I thought about, obviously the art was the first bit that came to mind, but then I thought, but display is also about how we see the world, or how the world is seen. And that led me to another book prize nominee, Royal Society Book Prize nominee, and that's Ed Yong's In Immense World. And this is about how animals see the world. So rather than just how we see the world, how animals see the world. And knowing, being a dog owner, I know dogs see the world quite differently to us. And not just see the world, but sense the world. You know, they use their nose a lot more than their eyes. They don't see colour the way we see colour, etc., etc. But seeing how many other animals, many other species, how they visualise and see the world sounds absolutely fascinating. Again, I have a very keen interest in biology, so I'll know bits of it, but it's such a broad subject. And I'm really interested to see how other animals visualize the world compared to us, you know. And species that I always remember trying to learn about and trying to think about how on earth does that work is bats, and using the echolocation and using echoes and sound to visualize the world. And it just, my mind can't comprehend it, but it's fascinating. So that is another book I'd love to get to. And the final book, and the one that I have already booked out from the library, so I may even get to it before November, so I'm not sure that now counts. But anyway, and this is again looking at how we visualize the world, how we see the world. And what I came across is one that looked at data. And data is so important to us and how we visualize the world and how we understand the world these days. There's so much data, you talk about big data, metadata, etc., etc. But this book is Invisible Women, Data in a World Designed for Men by Caroline Criado Perez. So this is about how data is very male-centric, in the sense that males are seen as the generic human, when actually, I believe if my population statistics are correct, there's more females in the world than there are males, so it should really be the other way. But I assume the patriarchal view of science has led us to a point where males are taken as the standard of humans as a whole. So this sounds fascinating because it looks at, you know, I think it looks at economics, it looks at healthcare, it looks at various different subjects which use data, and how that data doesn't necessarily reflect, you know, women, and therefore women are invisible, and the impacts that will have. So that one is the one that I really want to get to, and as I say, I've already booked out from the library, so I may even get to it in October. So I'm going to extend my Nonfiction November into the late part of October, because why not? It's a great book. I will enjoy it and I'll tell you about it. But so that's the third and final book for the final prompt. So that's all 12 books. As I say, there are other TBRs coming out. So if you search the hashtag Nonfiction November, I'm sure you will find other TBRs out there. I'll link some down below so you can go and check out some other channels. I'll also link Olive's initial announcement as well, so you can go and check that out. But please do, I encourage you to read nonfiction. It's a fabulous genre. It's more than a genre, really. Non-fiction is huge. It's like saying fiction is a genre, when it's split into hundreds of other genres within that. So it's a massive area. You will find books that you will really learn something and actually enjoy and have pleasure reading, because there are so many good books out there. So if none of these take your fancy, go check out some of the other videos out there and see if there's anything out there. If you don't want to do the prompts, don't do the prompts. Read another non-fiction. Read something you really fancy. You know, so I will find it fun just trying to connect a book you really want to read to one of these prompts, even as it's miles apart. See if you can find a connection, because that's just fun to do. And I will leave this video here. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy Nonfiction November. I hope you're enjoying creating your reading list for it as well. And I will speak to you in the next one. Bye.